Welcome to the Triskelion, the Purica Podcast, where it's all about nature, science, you. All good things have to start somewhere, and that's where we're starting today with the Triskelion, the Purica Podcast on natural health and lifestyle solutions, brought to you by Purica, and today featuring some very, very special guys who are going to walk us through medicinal mushrooms, everything from the history and the ancient traditions around medicinal mushrooms to why they're so popular in 2019 going into 2020, and also where do we go from here. And there's no two better people we'd love to have in the Triskelion with us today than, first of all, the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Formulator for Purica, Jason Watkin, who has spent 20 years pulling together what is now one of the real leaders in natural health and supplements in Canada, and Dr. John Holliday, who comes to us as Vice President of the International Society of Medicinal Mushrooms. He's also similarly VP for the African Society for Edible and Medicinal Mushrooms. He's the editor of the International Journal for Medicinal Mushrooms, and he's got such a long track record with the largest medicinal mushroom company in the world, Aloha Medicinals. And we'll actually start with Dr. John Holliday. And John, I'll tell you something, it's pretty special for the Purica community to have a chance to hear from you. You've given presentations at the CHFA, the Canadian Health Food Association annual conferences. You've given direct presentations to Purica retailers from throughout Western Canada. First of all, before we get into the history, what's drawn you to Purica? What makes Purica a natural fit for you to be associated with?
Oh, thanks for the invite to speak. And that's a good question, you know. I guess it's because I'm not a very good marketer, you know. I never really cared much for companies that were only looking for top dollar, you know, keep it in the black. Purica's one of the companies that I've dealt with over the years that really is focused on quality. And to me, as a scientist, that's all that counts, you know. Do the best you can consistently and provide something to the public that's actually going to work, you know. That's why I like Purica, and that's why I work with Purica.
Must be gratifying for you, Jason Watkins, CEO of Purica, because you really have always applied the same standards to everything that Purica has done over the years, and medicinal mushrooms have really been at the heart of everything Purica has done. So relationship with Dr. John Holliday has got to be pretty cool for you, too.
It's really cool, actually. I talked to John on the phone years and years and years ago. I hadn't met him until recently, and at the beginning, it was about quality, but we were actually purchasing the mushrooms not to resell as a company, but to give to cancer patients and HIV patients, hepatitis patients in our community. So we were just giving it out. So it all started with something that felt really good, but also John was coaching me right from the beginning, and I was really excited about how it changes someone's ability to deal with stress. That was one of my big things, and how it affects the immune system. So yeah, it's really good to have John here, and I've been spending a good amount of time with him lately, so it's been fun.
I know you're always happy to have a fun guy in the room with you talking about medicinal mushrooms, and there's no better fun guy than Dr. John Holliday. John, I wanted to ask you, I mean, obviously you've devoted a career to medicinal mushrooms over time, and again, not just here in North America, but around the world. We mentioned your African credentials off the top, the global reach of the National Journal of Medicinal Mushrooms, but what made you say, hey, this is where I want to focus, this is what I really believe in?
Was working as an engineer, and I was doing work for the military in the United States, for the Navy particularly, and I just don't believe in that, you know. And every day I'd walk past a door in the submarines that said Nuclear Weapons Department every day, and I'd just stop and I'd look at it and I'd think, what am I doing with my life? What am I wasting my talent on this for? And I had been growing mushrooms for a lot of years first, you know, as a hobby, and my back room was always full of mushrooms. And one day, you know, I just said that to a friend, and she said, well, put your money where your mouth is. You want to grow mushrooms? Grow mushrooms. Quit screwing around with the military, you know. So I did. I dropped out. I started growing mushrooms. And what I realized is that, in the Orient, they have such a long history of use of these mushrooms for medicinal products. And so I started reading up on it. And that's when I realized, and I hadn't known this before, but mushrooms are the largest raw material source for pharmaceutical drugs. I mean, so many of the drugs that are used today in mainstream medicine are derived from mushrooms. And here we've got this dichotomy of the Western medicine is using the raw materials from mushrooms to make high-dollar prescription drugs, and the Eastern community is using them straight up for the same purposes. Differences, cost and availability, allowing access to the public that needs it. And I just thought, how cool is that? I get to grow mushrooms that can actually help somebody that's got cancer,
Why do you think it's taken so long for the Western Hemisphere to catch up with the Eastern Hemisphere, which is, both of you guys over time have told me a lot that there's such an ancient tradition around medicinal mushrooms, but it seems to be sort of relatively new in terms of being embraced. Why do you think, John, it's taken so long?
Wow, I was in Hangzhou, China one day with a friend of mine, a Chinese woman who was translating for me, and she took me to this series of caves where the monks used to live. And there were inscriptions chiseled into the rock on the wall. And I was looking at that and I was saying, God, wouldn't it be amazing if we could read that? And she said, I can read that. I went, no, but it's 5,000 years old. And she said, yeah, but it's Chinese and I'm Chinese and I can read that. She said, some of the words are kind of obsolete, but the meaning is clear. And that's when it struck me what the difference was between Western medicine and Eastern medicine, is that in our Western society, in our tradition, I don't know, we started out with, was it the Phoenicians and the Sumerians and the Egyptians and the Greeks and the Romans, and with the collapse of each civilization, we lost the language, we lost the written language, and we lost the libraries. And we have to keep reinventing the wheel over and over, every, couple thousand years, I guess, at the most. And so the difference is, in places like China and India, they have 5,000 years of written record to refer to. The learning is sequential. It cascades downhill, And I think that's one of the reasons that there are a lot of really effective medicines and medical systems that are practiced in other parts of the world that we either don't know or don't recognize, or, we don't believe in it. Quotes around that one. Here in Canada, we've got, 100,000 doctors that say Chinese medicine doesn't work. And you've got 1.5 billion Chinese that say they're wrong. Who's being arrogant here,
We're in conversation with Dr. John Holliday and with Jason Watkin on the Triskelion, the Purica Podcast, today focused on the magic of medicinal mushrooms. We're not talking magic mushrooms, of course, which is another, podcast altogether at a different time, probably later on a Friday night. But Jason, you talk about, you really being compelled to understand medicinal mushrooms and their merit. You specifically relate to their stress management and reduction of stress and management of stress. When did the light bulb go on for you that this was something that really was going to make a difference to thousands and thousands of Canadians, Americans, and people around the world?
I think when we started working, when I was young and I was in university, my microbiology teacher was also a mycologist. He was the first professor that he made you feel like it was an infomercial. I remember a lot of it being really boring and copying notes off your overhead. And this guy, he was so excited, the whole class. They had him on the edge of their seats, 300 of us. And he said, it's as if they come from another planet. And he said it like that. And, it freaked us all out because we're mainstream university and everything. But at the same time, I thought, he was so excited. I've never seen somebody talk like that. He was so inspired as a teacher. There must be something to this. Then it took all those years of everything studying that. And then I got into the studies in Indo-Tibetan tradition. I've been doing that for many, many years. And they focus on the mind. And in Tibet and China and Korea and India, they had these 3 different traditions that pulled their medicines with them. In the Ayurvedic system, they had the Vedantic system, which made the whole of medicine part of their tradition. In the Taoist tradition, they had Chinese medicine. And the Buddhist tradition carried those ones and also had the Tibetan medicine, which focused a lot on mushrooms. So for me, it was about what can impact the mind and the whole mind-body paradigm to make someone actually feel better, rather than you give someone something for pain and maybe it helps the pain a bit, but they don't feel better. There's not that wellness sense of well-being or energy. And then when we started to purchase the mushrooms from John, and we were giving them away, like I said, for patients that had serious conditions like cancer and AIDS, they didn't just see differences in the condition. You could see they were a different person. And that's what people say. They take all these different mushrooms to help them with their immune system, but they said, I handle stress way better, things like that. So to me, it's been so obvious that mushrooms go way beyond, but then you appeal to the other traditions, like I say, in the ancient medicine, and they were the top of the heap. They were prized because of that. They're not just a stimulant or suppressant. They're actually changing the way that your body functions overall and your mind. And I think that's key for us at Purica, is mind and body.
I mean, listening to you, not only am I at the edge of my seat, the way your university professor had you at the edge of yours back in the day, but it reminds me of what you've said over and over again, that when you really break down disease, it's dis-ease.
Yeah.
And promoting ease, you'd think, would lead us to health. Dr. John Holliday, why should people uninitiated be curious about the potential impact of medicinal mushrooms on their health and well-being?
Let me get back to that in just a moment, because I want to build a little bit on what was just said regarding stress and immune system. And a lot of people don't really understand the link between stress and immunity, but it's crucial, and it's a closed loop. You see, we evolved for millions of years in a simpler world. We had more time to lay back and relax. And today our stress level is insane. It is out of line. Think about it for a moment. What do we do first thing in the morning? We get in, we close the door, and we pilot a 3,000-pound death machine down the highway at 60 miles an hour, you know.
On a slow day.
Yeah, yeah. And there is this background level of stress, this inherent stress in our society constantly. And what this does is it ramps up a couple of systems in the body, which are essentially our fight or flight systems. We have adrenaline being released into the bloodstream, trickling in slowly but constantly, and we have this other hormone called cortisol, which is released from the adrenal glands. And two things that cortisol and adrenaline do is they ramp up your awareness, your speed of response, things like that, but they shut down the immune system. So increasing immunity reduces stress, or reducing stress increases immunity. This is a locked-in cycle that we don't get away from. So when you were saying that people taking these exhibit less stress, of course.
Absolutely.
Because we're boosting their immune system. We did a long study with calves, small cows, calves. Calves are generally raised on small mom-and-pop farms, and they go on a train where they get taken to a feedlot somewhere at 10 days old. Very stressful for the calf. And actually, there's quite a high rate, about 10 or 11% death rate by the time they get to the feedlots. And in the industry, they term those train wrecks, right? So we did a long study giving them Purica Complete 360, and we drew blood from one of the veins in the tail twice a day. And one of the things that we looked at was cortisol levels. And the ones that we treated, the cortisol level dropped right down quickly, and they got back to eating, and they gained more weight, and we didn't lose any. Where the other control group lost almost 10%, we lost nothing. Right. And this is interesting because it shows the link between stress and immunity.
Yeah.
And that really seems to be a great starting point for people saying, hey, how can this help me? Because I'll tell you, the vast minority of us lead stress-free lives. And in fact, even them, they might think it's stress-free. There's always going to be some stress. But the vast majority of us are overstressed. That's a pretty good entry point to say, hey, maybe some of these medicinal mushrooms can help me by boosting my immunity and reducing my stress.
Well, anybody that's ever had a cold or a flu knows that it's a pretty uncomfortable event. And once you come down with those symptoms, there's not a whole lot you can do. Get some cough syrup, try to sleep, and ride it out, right? So one of the things that a lot of people do is they'll take an immune enhancement, which is the mushroom compounds, in order to reduce the likelihood of them getting a cold. And boy, do we ever see that, People that, in my company, everybody gets it for free and everybody takes it. And it's like, there is no excuse for a sick day. If they call in for a sick day, they just don't want to work because nobody gets colds, nobody gets flus.
Or they've run out.
They've run out, yeah. So it's time, in our evolution for us to start taking a little bit more direct responsibility for our health. I'm a little bit older, and when I grew up, we were taught to turn it all over to the surgeon, to the doctor, to the physician, to abdicate our responsibility to the guy in the white suit. And, maybe that worked at one time, but it's not working so well now. I think the population is too big. The physicians don't have as much time to spend with us as we would feel comfortable with. And so the general public is starting to pay more attention to eating well, at least we talk about it, exercising, reading the labels, see what we're putting in our body. Because the regulatory authorities don't always look at our well-being as the first consideration, Some of the preservatives and pesticides that are approved, I have to wonder, how good are those things for us? Kills every insect known, and it's on my apples, I'm not sure that's a good idea. And so just simply addressing daily what we put in our mouth, that's the only way that we can really do it, is the one thing we do every day as we eat, if we can eat a little bit of something to supplement our normal diet, supplement it with compounds which are known to increase immunity, compounds that are known to reduce stress, to reduce the chance of getting viral infections, for example. It's like, why not?
Absolutely.
It costs less than going to Starbucks every day and having a coffee.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a lot of bang for the buck, I think.
Yeah. You're in the Natural Health Zone with the Triskelion, the Purica Podcast. Tom Mayanek on the Triskelion, the Purica Podcast. We're talking medicinal mushrooms with two guys who really know their stuff. Dr. John Holliday, Vice President of the International Society of Medicinal Mushrooms, also VP of the African Society for Edible and Medicinal Mushrooms. He's an editor of the International Journal of Medicinal Mushrooms. And Jason Watkin, Chief Executive Officer, Chief Formulator of Purica, and he's been doing it for 20 years. This is the 20th anniversary of Purica. And when we're talking about medicinal mushrooms, Jason, you mentioned it off the top. It's got to give you great pride that you really have stayed true to that original mission, which is natural plant products, medicinal mushrooms that can really make a difference. And there's very few Purica products that don't have at least one medicinal mushroom contained in it.
Absolutely. Because, like John was saying earlier, stress is something that we're all dealing with in this life. And if you can deal with stress in any way, if there's anything that adds as a support that's easy to take, it's going to make a difference. And right from the beginning, because I respect the way that they did things, the ancient ways of medicine, and how they mixed it with everything, mind, body was everything, they wouldn't have pulled one compound out of a mushroom. Or for anything that they prize, they kept it in synergy. And so what we were trying to do, and when we came across John was with Aloha, was to find a way to include everything that the ancients would have included, but to use modern technology to make it more absorbable, more assimilable, have a more standardized mechanisms of keeping the active ingredients at certain levels and keeping it super clean, because it's very difficult in today's environment compared to 1,000 or 1,500 years ago to have the same pristine environment. We don't, unless you grow high on the Tibetan plateaus. So how do you do that? So anyways, John and his company had come along with all those different things that we were looking for. So to me, it was a no-brainer. And it's been wonderful ever since. And just seeing the results, I mean, they speak for themselves. You can tell someone, just try everything and see what happens. And then try a Purica product, and you can't deny the difference. It's a huge difference, the way you feel.
Dr. John, you've heard always a conversation about parents being asked, like, who's your favorite kid, or who do you love most? And the reality is it's an impossible question for most parents anyway to answer. There's equal love even if the kids are a little bit different. Do you feel the same way about medicinal mushrooms, in the sense that you don't necessarily love one or the other more than others? They're just different? Or do you have a medicinal mushroom that is your fave, your go-to?
The answer is both, really. My fascination has always been on Cordyceps. And this is a mushroom that grows only out of the head of this one caterpillar above 14,000 feet in the Himalayas. A mushroom that grows out of the head of a caterpillar in the high Himalayas. It's like, how can you not love that one, right? And it has such incredible medicinal properties, and we use it for so many different things. But at the same time, looking at it more from the medicinal perspective, I have to say, what's the goal that you're trying to accomplish? There are medicinal mushrooms like lion's mane, for example, which has nerve growth factors in it, which are extremely useful in conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and all kinds of nerve damage, spinal damage, for example, because it actually triggers the regrowth of new nerve tissue. We look at a disease like Alzheimer's, which results in loss of brain tissue, Swiss cheese, holes in the brain, basically. And this is the only thing I know of that actually triggers the regrowth of new brain tissue, So do I have a favorite? Well, I'm fascinated by Cordyceps. Do I use them all for what we know them to be the best use for? Absolutely. So I think it depends really on what we're trying to accomplish.
Cordyceps, lion's mane. Jason, you've got 3 kids, but in terms of your family of medicinal mushrooms, which are the ones that you've always been, to use Dr. John's words, most fascinated with? And do you have a favorite mushroom or two?
Yeah, because I'm so focused on the mind, and I already have a lot of energy, I think. Lion's mane is my go-to, and then right next to it is Cordyceps. I think people, if they need more sleep, and really right off the bat, they need to sleep, they need to relax, they're type A. I think maybe reishi is the best, and maybe chaga, something long term. But I think Cordyceps and lion's mane for body mind, they're a game changer. Mm-hmm. If you're getting older, or even if you're not getting old, and living in today's world of stress, you feel you're more energized, you're clearer headed, but you're more relaxed as well, and you don't get sick really, or if you do, it's really minimal. So that's why when we develop Complete 360, that those two are keys in there. But we also have other products that we just focus on those two. And yeah, I think those are definitely my faves as well.
So I'll ask both of you the same question. What's your message to people who haven't used medicinal mushrooms, who haven't tried them for their various concerns? What's the message? What's the hook that you'd like them to consider?
So for me, it's anybody that hears me speak, well-being has to be a state of mind with how you're dealing with the body, because they're whole. And so if you take something, for me, I want it to make me feel better in the mind too. I just want to feel overall better, not just deal with a symptom or know that I'm taking something that I should because they say it's good for you. I want to feel something. And when you take the right mushroom, the right preparation, you can't deny it. And maybe other people will recognize it first because we train our own minds to think it's everyone else's fault why we're upset or anything. And so they just notice that you don't react the same, or you're more energy. It's easier to get up. You sleep better. Your mind works more effectively. So I think you see it. I like to see things. I like results. I don't want to just take something because I think it's good. I'm going to stop taking it after a while. Mushrooms I've been taking for years and years and years because they change the way you feel. I don't think you deny it. Sorry.
No problem. Dr. John, so, let us know your perspective in terms of not only what your message is to people who haven't, ever before tried medicinal mushrooms, but is there a line or two that you can share with us that has made a difference for people who've been on the fence and has actually made them now lifelong proponents of medicinal mushrooms?
Yeah, actually there is, A lot of people over the years, they've always asked me, well, if I take this, how do I know if it's going to do anything? This thing costs me $25, How do I know if it's going to work? And I always tell them two things. I say, you've been living in that body all your life. Nobody knows it better than you. Try it and see how you feel. And secondly, I say, take it for 3 weeks. Say, if it doesn't work, I'll give you your money back, right? 20 years, I never had anybody ask for taking their money back, ever, perfect. Not once. It's like, that's it. You take a lot of things in life. You go take your vitamin C or something, and you're probably not going to feel a lot. You take it because you think you should or whatever, but it doesn't change your life. It doesn't make you deal with stress easier or something. But that doesn't seem to be the case with the medicinal mushrooms. You take the medicinal mushrooms, and you're going to feel a difference. Yeah. Give it 2 weeks. Give it 3 weeks. You're going to feel a difference. You will know. If you don't take it. It's not going to work for you. But that's the rare person that ever stops.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tom Mayonek, along with Dr. John Holliday and Jason Watkin of Purica. This is part 1 of 2 parts on medicinal mushrooms. I got to tell you something. These first 28 minutes, you guys have shown that you are nothing but fun guys. We'll make sure that we continue having the fun. Next round, we're going to focus on some of the specific Purica differentiators, Purica's approach to medicinal mushrooms, and Dr. John Holliday's take as to why those differentiators are so important. We'll also look at some of the ways in which you can consume medicinal mushrooms in maybe not so a traditional way, some new product innovations, some new blends for you to consider. That's all coming up in episode 2 of the Triskelion, the Purica Podcast, with big thanks to Dr. John Holliday and Jason Watkin of Purica. You've been listening to The Triskelion, the Purica Podcast. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Purica Wellness, and sign up for our e-newsletter at purica.com.